Good evening from Jerusalem, Israel. This is Lowell Joseph Gallen, founder of the Root and Branch Association Limited, established in New York State and God of Israel Bless America in 1981, and now celebrating our 40th anniversary. I would like to welcome our viewers and listeners worldwide and our live Zoom studio audience to this evening's program in our Root and Branch Association Limited English Language Conference and Lecture Series, broadcasting from Jerusalem, Israel, and now celebrating the start of our second quarter century. As we always do at the beginning of each broadcast, we thank for the first quarter century, which was from January 1995 until December 2020, our hosts for a quarter century, 25 years, the Orthodox Union Israel Center at 22 Karen Hayesad Street in Jerusalem, which made us so welcome. And there we got our start, and especially the educational director emeritus and founder and editor-in-chief emeritus of the unique Torah Tidbits publication, Mr. Phil Chernovsky, his Eshet Chayil, Woman of Valor, Tony Chernovsky, and Mrs. Rachel Russick, the scheduler who kept the whole thing going over there for hundreds of programs without having a nervous breakdown, and she still does it. So today is the 25th of May, 5781 in the Gregorian calendar, and the 14th day of Sivan, 5781 in the Hebrew Israelite calendar. We are broadcasting from the land of Israel, city of God, Jerusalem, hill of the priests, Givat Hanania, Abu Tur, overlooking Mount Moriah, where we believe that the third and final Israelite temple of Jerusalem will soon be under reconstruction and stand forever as per the prophet Ezekiel's vision. Please see the biblical book of Ezekiel, chapters 40 through 48. In view of the events of the last 2 weeks, I found it necessary to add the following statement. The Root and Branch Association promotes the faith in the God of Israel, the creator of us all, honoring and observing his Noahide covenant and laws, and honoring his land, Torah, and people covenant with his chosen people, Israel. That's 12 tribes, incidentally, not just what the world knows as the Jewish people, which is a small part of it, Jews in the land of Israel and worldwide. To make it more explicit, the God of Israel, who created us all, commands everyone to believe in him, to honor and observe his Noahide covenant and laws, and to honor his land, Torah, and people covenants with Israel. And you have to do it right now. Time is up. Don't believe me? Wait and watch and see what happens worldwide. It's already happening now. I did my job. The rest is all up to you out there. Now, our speaker for this evening's program is old friend and Pashtun leader in Europe, Mr. Fazal or Rehman Afridi, who is the chairman of our Root and Branch Association Pashtun Israel Fellowship. And this is the first of our monthly Root and Branch Association Pashtun Israel Fellowship meetings. Now, Dr. Glassman is going to introduce Mr. Afridi and his guest, Mr. Umar Daud Khattak. In the special circumstances, because Fazal, it has ugly cover, but I like the book. My first book, Cracking the Quran Code, God's Land, Torah, and People Covenants with Israel in the Quran and Islamic Tradition. Took me 3 years to put together and published it on December 31st, 2009, the first edition. And Fazal wrote an introduction to the book. And there I want to share with you some of his credits, who our speaker is. And then Les will add more, as well as introducing Fazal's guest, Mr. Umar Daud Khattak. Fazal or Rehman Afridi comes from the most dangerous region of the world, the federally administered tribal areas of Pakistan, FATA. This is the main global center of extremism and terrorism in Pakistan and around the world. He has an education with a Master of Public Administration specializing in marketing, distinction of being a gold medalist. He worked as an honorary lecturer with the International Islamic University in Islamabad. He is a journalist, writer, and human rights activist. Fazal is a columnist for the Frontier Post, an English daily paper in Pakistan, former executive vice president of the Pakistan International Human Rights Organization, author, Bosnia and Herzegovina in the New Millennium, member of the research team on women's participation in political and public life in Pakistan, a project of the International Women's Rights Action Watch Asia Pacific. Editor, human rights investigator, Khyber, and administrator. He's author of a booklet entitled Draconian Law of Frontier Crime Regulation of 1901, enforced in federally administered tribal areas of Pakistan. And he worked actively for the rights of the people of the federally administered tribal areas of Pakistan, participating in the field of women's rights. Perhaps I've left out the most important point. Fazal is, as most Pashtun believe, and there are about 50 million in the world, descended from the lost tribes of Israel, except where they ever really lost. And that is one of the purposes of our Pashtun Israel Fellowship, is to reunite the Pashtunim worldwide with Jews and other members of the lost tribes. And now I will hand over our program to our Root and Branch Association Program Chair, Dr. Les Glassman.
Thank you, Lowell. It's a great honor and privilege to be here this evening. And Fazal, I cannot thank you enough, and your esteemed guest, Umar, Daud, Khattak, which I'll introduce in a minute. But I just want to mention something. Fazal, your previous talk, that when you were on the Zoom, when you appeared for the Root and Branch, it was recorded and we put it on YouTube. And on a daily basis, I get comments from that presentation that you gave. And it was really absolutely phenomenal, your presentation. And what's actually very interesting about your presentation there is a lot of the comments actually say that the Pashtuns aren't at all connected to the lost 10 tribes of Israel. So there's a lot of misinformation out there as well. And I think you are a breath of fresh air because, you know, being Pashtun and knowing the history and being a world authority on the subject, you're shedding not only light onto Pashtuns, but you're showing the truth. You're showing not only as a world scholar, but people are enlightened. And I think those who watch your presentations, they're getting a different view, a view that isn't shared by a lot of people out there. That's according to the comments that I get. So it is so important, our events that Lowell has organized. And we really want to thank you for taking the time, especially in these times where there's such a rise in anti-Semitism worldwide, to have, you know, two members from the Pashtuns here on our Zoom event, showing that coexistence can happen and does happen. And we really are so grateful to you. And I just want to introduce your esteemed guest. And, you know, just looking at the bio of Umar, it's so topical because we see what happened in Belarus, where they actually, with the help of the Russian Air Force, they grounded a flight for somebody who they said was an agitator. And the flight was going from Greece to, I think, Lithuania, and it was grounded in Belarus. It's unbelievable. And a similar thing happened to you, Umar. So I'm just going to mention a little bit about your esteemed guest, Fazal, and then you'll take over. So, and this is really something unbelievable. When I read this, I'm in awe. So Umar Daud Khattak is a Pashtun activist who struggles for the rights and identity of Pashtuns in Pakistan and Afghanistan. His struggle includes secular and moderate values, a Pashtun society free from religious fanaticism, a national identity for Pashtun in Pakistan and Afghanistan under the historical Pashtunian flag. He was arrested, and this is really frightening, Umar, and I think it's unbelievable, but you were arrested by a Pakistani military intelligence On the 9th of September 2018, from Dubai International Airport. I mean, this is a travesty of justice, but at the Dubai International Airport, you were bundled into a PIA, that's a Pakistani flight, to Islamabad. And you spent 357 days in a Pakistani military and intelligence cell. I don't know why this didn't make world headlines, and I don't know why this is the first time that I'm hearing this, but I think it's such a travesty of justice. Anyway, you were in that cell for I mean, it's just unbelievable, for so long. What happened is that 357 days in a military and intelligence cell, you were then shifted to the central jail in Peshawar, and you were sentenced by the lower courts of Peshawar to 15.5 months for promoting, and this was this alleged crime, allegedly anti-state activities, and you were charged for having alleged links with Indian and Afghan intelligence agencies. You were finally released on the 20th of January 2021, which wasn't that long ago, after serving 2.5 years in prison. I mean, this is just something unbelievable. Umar, Daud, Khattak authorized a chapter in Dr. Richard Benkin's book, What is Moderate Islam?, published in the United States of America, where he recounts about his early life in an Islamic madrasa and his Islamic fanatic parents forcing him to be a madrasa student and becoming an Islamic fanatic mullah. That is how he went against Islamic extremism in Pashtun society and started his struggle as a Pashtun nationalist. So I am in awe when I read that, and I think it is such a tremendous honor and a privilege to have both you, Umar, and Fazal with us this evening. So without any further ado, over to you, Fazal, and we eagerly await your talk, and Umar, we eagerly await your whatever you say, because sure, we are really honored to have you both. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Les Glassman, and my dear friend Lowell Joseph Gallen. Actually, my biodata, which you mentioned, it was about 11 years old. So now the federally administered tribal areas have been merged into Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in Pakistan. But the same law, in one way or another, applies there. Just like Umar Daud Khattak, who has passed through really difficult times in the recent times, especially in the torture cells of Pakistani intelligence services, physically and mentally tortured, and then handed over to the ordinary courts, and even then you remain there for about 15 months, and just on false charges he was kept. And you have said that there was no headlines in the international media. We cannot talk of international media, but even in the Pakistani mainstream media, he was presented as an agent of some agencies, and this is the fate of Pashtuns. It's for quite some time under the international conspiracy, and along with some proxies in the region, Pashtuns have been kept in a really difficult situation for quite a long time, and even now they are suffering. And even in Pakistan, we are not considered as equal citizens. We are just portrayed as violent people, barbaric people, and even terrorists. And it was recently that Pashtun movement raise the voice of Pashtuns at international level. And I have been working with this movement as a diaspora, and for some extent we have been successful in projecting the bright face of the Pashtuns to the international community. As you would have heard of in the last 20 years, during the so-called war on terror, about 75,000 Pashtuns have been killed in different military operations, in which F-16 jet bombers, artillery, and gunship helicopters have been used against Pashtuns. And about 75,000 Pashtuns have been killed in those operations. And an estimated 32,000 Pashtuns are missing due to the pressure of the Pashtun protection movement. Some of the missing persons have been released, and not only we have raised this issue with the Pakistan, but with the international community, and especially with the United Nations. And United Nations has taken up this issue really seriously with the government of Pakistan, not only raising the issue of missing persons, which we have been submitting to the special procedures and working group on involuntary and enforced disappearances, but they have also objected to the law or the ordinance under which these persons had been forcibly disappeared by the Pakistani military services, intelligence services, and directly by the Pakistani military. Action in aid of civil power. First, this ordinance was imposed in 2011 and was used in posterity from 2008. And then when the FATA, federally administered tribal areas, were merged into Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, it was again introduced and imposed on the whole province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in 2019. So that law was really objected by the United Nations, and they demanded from Pakistan, is this law or ordinance is according to the Constitution of Pakistan, or is it according to the international law or international human rights law? So we have been working on these issues, and just like in the United States, that a movement has been started, just like Black Lives Matter. We have also started a movement for the Pashtun people, that Pashtun lives also matter. So there seems to be the international aspect of the persecution of Pashtuns. There seems to be the regional and local level of persecution of Pashtuns. And I think just like the Jews who have been suffering for the last 3,000 years, we Pashtuns have been also bracketed like the Jews, and the whole world is involved in the persecution of the Pashtuns. So we will discuss that link of the Pashtuns as the lost tribes, and we will discuss different aspects of and the comments and the research of important scholars. We will discuss it later, but I think it will be better that Umar Daud Khattak also speak a little bit about his life and what he has suffered and what he has done for Pashtun people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm really very happy today that I'm speaking here. As you introduced, I'm Umar Daud, Khattak, a Pashtun activist. I've been struggling for the Pashtun's rights since last 10 years. I've been in Afghanistan since 2011 with frequent travels to New Delhi, India, in regard to the political struggle I was doing, especially to attract the international media. As you talked about the international media, they pick the news of my arrest and the news of the torture cell that I was put into, and the news of the false prosecution in Peshawar Central Jail or in Peshawar Judicial Complex. The Pakistani media did show me as a traitor, as a foreign agent, as an Afghan and Indian agent, as a spy. But the international media, they didn't do anything. The BBC, even in Voice of America, which we think is a pro-Pashtun media, in Voice of America, there is a person, Shamim Shahid. He's a Pashtun nationalist, but still, he wrote very disturbing news about him. He copied the Pakistani military establishment statements, and he even wrote his name with that news item, which he wrote for the Voice of America Urdu chapter. So it's very much disturbing for me that no international media highlighted my case, while the Pakistani mainstream media, they were running breaking news, and there have been debates, and the Pakistani Federal Investigation Agency director, he did a press conference. It was so much highlighted in Pakistan against me, but there was no one to speak the truth, to speak in my favor, in my defense. There was no one, even among the Pashtuns who are running small news. Only the Pashtun Times and by Aurangzeb Khan Zalmai, they did try their best, but so much Pashtuns working in the Voice of America, Deva Radio, BBC, but no one cared. So this is very disturbing for me. About the Pashtuns and Jews relationship, I've been working with a couple of people from Israel, Nadav Sufi and Donna Sufi, Jonathan Shapiro, and there was a couple more people working in the lost tribes, and the similarities between the Pashtuns and the Jews, cultural similarities, ancestral topics, and the lineage. We've been working on this, and there was a group of Pashtuns in Kabul with me, and we had even planned to some people to Israel, as the Nadav Sufi and Jonathan Sufi. They had some plans of bringing Pashtuns to Israel in the process of the lost tribes of Israel, as we have been told that they've been bringing people who are from the lost tribes, and especially the Pashtuns. So we also worked in this area as well, but then I was arrested from the Dubai airport by Pakistani Federal Investigation Agency, and with Dubai airport security, bagged into a PIA flight, and I was taken to Islamabad. They kept me for 34 days in F8 ISI's guest house in Islamabad. There, the ISI Director General by then, his name was Lieutenant General Naveed Mukhtar. He was previously Karachi's Corps Commander. He and his team, one brigadier, one lieutenant colonel, major, and one lower rank official from the ISI. They investigated me for 34 days. During the initial investigation in Islamabad, in their guest house for 34 days, it was like a guest environment. There was no torture, nothing. Like I was a guest. And they were giving me food and everything. I was just like a guest. But suddenly on the night of, I was brought from Dubai on 9th of September 2018. I was in ISI's guest house in Islamabad for 34 days. On 12th of October 2018, 12 o'clock midnight, two persons broke into my room and they bundled me into a vehicle, a 4x4 vehicle with black doors, and they took me to Peshawar Fort, Killa Hisar. We call it Killa Hisar. It is an ancient British era fort in Peshawar. There were two people, one lieutenant colonel and one major. They investigated me again, and then finally, on the 13th to 3 o'clock at night, taken into a dark cell, a very dark, small, narrow cell. I was put there from 12th October 2018 and 28th of August 2019. It was 10 months and 10 days. And then I was shifted to Peshawar Central Jail on 22nd August 2019. I also stayed 4 days from 20 August, 22nd August for 2 days. And FIA, Federal Investigation Agency's custody, and then was taken to Central Jail, Peshawar. There I was for 15 and a half months, and finally on 7th December 2020, I was released from Central Jail, Peshawar. As soon as I reached the main gate of the Central Jail, Peshawar, and I was about to hire a rickshaw or taxi to reach home, there were about 7 to 8 people who jumped on me and who beat me and who tore apart my clothes, and they put me in a vehicle, and my eyes were tied. There was CTD, counterterrorism department, and they again put me into a very dark underground cell, a very small one, barely the size of a human being. I could barely sleep there, like not comfortable. It was very small, and there I was for 44 days, and then finally on 28th of January 2021, I was thrown out on a road in Peshawar at night, 10 o'clock, and then I reached home finally. So this is the story of my arrest and of my custody with the Pakistani intelligence. There were 5 agencies. The first one who arrested me at Dubai airport were FIA plus ISI, Inter-Service Intelligence, Pakistani Premier Intelligence Agency. And in Islamabad for 34 days, I was with ISI. And in Peshawar, I was with military intelligence for 10 months and 10 days. And then they handed me FIA, Federal Investigation Agency. I was with them for 2 days. And then I was handed over to the court, judicial magistrate. I was in their custody for 15 and a half months. And finally released in counterterrorism department, CTD. They packed me and they kept me for 44 days in their cell. So totally, 5 Pakistani agencies, they put me in their custody and they mentally and physically tortured me. And then I was finally released. And I'm now glad I'm talking to you. I'm in my village. I'm reunited with my family after 10 years because I left in 2011. I'm now in district Khattak, Khyber Pashtun. where mostly, not mostly, but 100% the Khattak tribe lives. Thank you very much.
Umar, thank you very much. Wow, it is herring. Can I just ask you, Umar, you know, Belarus now, and it's in the news right now, there's certain countries that are boycotting Belarus airlines, and it's caused such a furor and such a, like, it's breaking news all over Europe. But how come your story didn't even make any of the press? It just doesn't make sense.
It's partly because of our own people, our like-minded Pashtun nationalists, even very close friends of mine. They didn't even try to highlight my story or highlight my issue. I was in Pakistani government custody for 2.5 years, for 28 and a half months. But very few people who were very close to me, like brothers, with whom I was living in Kabul together, like we shared room or we shared, you know, same place. There were hardly 2 or 3 people who were posting on social media, but it was not enough to reach the international media. The Pakistani government, the Pakistani Federal Investigation Agency, their director did a press conference, and all of the mainstream Pakistani media, they picked up that news is a breaking news that they have arrested an Indian agent. It was on the front line of Pakistani newspaper, the Dawn, the News, you know, that they've arrested a traitor, an Indian agent, you know, a spy. They used a terrorist even. They've used such words, but there was no international media, even the Afghan media, the Indian media, they're friends to me. They didn't respond to that. They did severe accusation on the government of Afghanistan that the government of Afghanistan gave me a job in Kabul. It was false. It's wrong. I'm Indian and Afghan agent, but no one responded.
So Umar, can I ask, where was the human rights? Where were the Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, Doctors Without Borders? Where were all these so-called human rights organizations? Because maybe you don't fit their narrative. It's mind-boggling that these organizations and the world media have very selective reporting, very selective reporting. And
of course.
Fazal?
Okay, can I add something at this point? You're the guest, so you talk first.
I would like to add a few words to Daud Khattak. Actually, he was in prison, but there was a lot of propaganda from Pakistani military services and media that he has made a deal with the Pakistani government and to come back to his country. So that there was a lot of propaganda in Pakistani press to tarnish his image that he betrayed Pashtuns and done a deal with the ISI. So that made the Pashtun nationalists a little bit on back foot. But normally, it's one case, Umar Daud Khattak, but there are thousands of cases, you know. Even, you know, the Pakistani military raided the tribal areas. They used F-16s on the innocent Pashtun people, gunship helicopters and artillery. F-16, the Pakistan cannot use against India, but they used it against Pashtuns and Baloch. So there is no mention in the international media. So the international media is selective, and the local mainstream media is also, you know, it's not covering. There's complete media blackout for the Pashtun and Baloch people. So nothing comes to the media if the Pakistani military establishment doesn't want it to be to appear. So just like the Israel, you can see it, all these big organizations, they are there to condemn it. And the Human Rights Council, there are members like Iran, Pakistan, and Libya and the other countries. There is not a single resolutions against them, but when it comes to Israel, you can see, there are so many resolutions. There is a kind of media bias, and the international media get information from the local media. If local media doesn't give information, which are under the thumb of the Pakistani military establishment, so there is no news. So the same happened to Umar Daud Khattak.
Okay, I'd like to add something here. Unless we continue to discuss this, and it's actually very simple when you understand the basic principles. What is referred to in Jews, the international media is not a media in the sense that you think. These are corporate fascist mouthpieces which will say or not see whatever their governments or the organizations or the corporations that control them want them to say. And if you don't participate in that, you won't be working for them very long. Now, I worked for Reuters in New York at its second largest bureau in 1990 to 1991. I worked for CBS Television National Network News in their New York offices. It was a whole city block. I produced a nationally syndicated radio show. It's not complicated at all. They're not going to talk about anything that the party line, again, the corporation, the government, or the organization says. Humans, it's also very simple. In the Arab and Muslim world in general, there are exceptions. There are no humans and they have no rights. There are dogs and pashas. Umar and Fazal know exactly what I'm talking about. The expression is the dog of the pasha is the pasha. You have small ruling classes. Most people are poor and miserable. There's no democracy. The Central Asian countries are a little bit different. The ethnic Turkic Sunni Muslim majority nations are different. But from Morocco to Pakistan, this shouldn't even ask the question. Now, humans only have rights when they're violated, real or imagined, by Jews or Israelis, because they don't like Jews and Israelis. I'll give you a simple example. In 1970, there was a Palestinian. Now, first of all, there is no Palestinian people and there is no Palestine. There are Arab tribes, clans, and families of the land of Israel. And many, if not most of them, turn out to be Jews who never left, according to the research of Yitzhak Ben Tzvi and more recently Tzvi Sinai. There was an uprising against King Hussein by Palestinians. My college roommate was there. His family had moved to Amman from Tulkarm in 1967. I asked, were you thrown out? He said, no, we chose to go. And they were challenging the king's power. So that was resolved in a very Arab and Muslim way. The king engaged his Muslim Bedouin army and also Chechen in the mass murder and slaughter of 40,000 Palestinians. My roommate said they were firing artillery on our residential areas. And that was the end of it. And in the Arab and Muslim world, that's understood. That's the way we do it. Now, who was in charge of that slaughter? Ziad al-Haq, later the president of Pakistan, was an officer. And the Pakistani contingent there with King Hussein's Bedouin army, 40,000 slaughtered. And then when the PLO escaped, they went over the borders to Israel because they knew that wouldn't happen in here. Then they went and ruined Lebanon and then plunged that into several 100,000 dead. That was 1970. But Pakistan wasn't finished. There was a revolt in East Bangladesh in 1971. Within 1 year, the Pakistani army engaged in the mass murder of 3 million people. That's a lot of work. You don't hear about because humans only have rights when they're violated, real or imagined, by Jews. Another thing that Jews constantly get mixed up that the nations have a moral double standard. The answer to that is very simple. The nations don't have moral standards. They have interests, or what they perceive to be their interests, real or imagined. This is only a question Jews constantly ask this. Why is there bias in the media? Because not a media. So they didn't report about, even if you would inform them, because they're not interested. Look what you said, 75,000. It's the moral, evil, wicked, depraved, and fallen world, bluntly, in rebellion against its creator, simply because it's been permitted. In our eschatological timetable, that period's almost over. In fact, it's coming to an end now. Les is moving in between his dental office and home. We might not see him for a minute. And now I'm going to hand it back to you for your comment. The torture. Oh, I don't know if Les heard what,
no, I'm here.
I don't know if you heard what I just said.
Yes, of course I heard, of course.
Okay, so it's not complicated. And again, once one gets out of the zombie-like hypnotism of, but it's the media, they're not fair. They're not a media, they're corporate fascist mouthpieces, and they don't like Jews in Israel, and they don't like any kind of Jewish sovereignty in the land of Israel, and they're not interested in the Pashtunim. Yeah, because if you want to say it doesn't fit their narrative, you can talk all day and all night. They will report, real or imagined, what they believe their interests are. Again, it's not hypocrisy. It's not that they have a moral double standard. The nations don't have moral standards. They have interests, or what they perceive to be their interests. So that you were tortured. Pakistan is an institutionalized narco-terrorist state. Most of the people are poor. There's a small, rich ruling class that oppresses and exploits everyone else, like the people who own the land in the land of Israel and oppressed the Falahim while they lived in Beirut. They couldn't care less about people. It's simply a way to beat Israel over the head. Now, if someone would fire a rocket at Pakistan, 2 or 3, there wouldn't be more. And if fire a rocket at Vladimir Putin's Russia, they tried that in Chechnya. You won't have a second rocket. It's only with Jews, because they don't like Jews. They don't like Israelis. It's not complicated at all. And they also don't like the idea that there'll be a reunification of the 12 tribes underway now. That's why, lest you saw so many people who've been brainwashed by Wahhabi propaganda. What? No, I'm not Israelite. I'm an Aryan, or I'm a something else. They know perfectly well from their fathers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers what their traditions are. What one of our tasks is to break the stranglehold of Wahhabi Salafi hypnotic propaganda over the poor, wretched, especially young people in the Pashtunistan and in the terrible madrasah. I know what goes on there, of northern Pakistan. What goes on as young boys are turned into suicide murderers that have no families, are simply abused and misused by our CIA and their colleagues in Saudi Arabia. Now, supposedly there've been some changes. I'll believe it when I see it, under President Trump, who incidentally is still the president, and bin Salman and the old Wahhabi power establishment has been thrown out, and the new guys are in. All right, I'll believe that when I see it. It will take a lot of you're guilty until you're proven innocent in my court. After 70 years of financing mass murder worldwide, 99% of Muslim mass murder worldwide is Wahhabi in theology, and Saudi Arabia, Kuwaiti, and Gulf state and funding. That's what I had to say. So there should be no surprise. No one's interested in you, Umar. Only if you were tortured and beaten up, real or imagined, in an Israeli jail. It's very simple. The Christian and Muslim worlds are most of the into replacement and supersessionist theology. There's not supposed to be a Jewish state here, any kind. That's where this is all coming from. I've said what I had to say. Now I hand the floor back to all of you.
Okay, can I just ask, Umar, when you left the madrasas, did you still keep a connection with your parents, with your family?
No, I was not allowed. I was not allowed to have any sort of connection with my family and friends. I was totally out of the scene. I was disappeared.
And now, do you have a connection with your family now?
I'm living with my family now.
Okay.
At home. in my village.
And are they not
Yes.
as phonetic as they were before? Or they,
Sorry?
your family, before they were a little bit fanatical, Islamic fanatical, and now are they much more moderate?
They have changed a little after I went through the prison and after I went through hard times. They're a little bit changed, but theology is the same, but they are not as hard as they were when I was small, when I was a child.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Fazal, if you have any comments or if you want to add.
Yeah. I worked for BBC in 2016. I was translating articles in news for BBC from Pashtun Persian in Afghanistan. I worked with them. I was their employee, but still they didn't care. There are a lot of friends of mine who work in BBC as far as the international media is concerned. About my childhood is I mentioned in my introduction that I was forced into studying in an Islamic madrasa. I memorized Quran at the age of 13 when I was in class 8. I didn't like it, but I was forced to memorize Quran and become, an Islamic cleric afterwards. When I was small, so my parents were forced Islamic studies. I did memorize Quran, and I was even leading the prayers in Ramadan, in the month of Ramadan. I did it for once or twice, and then when I relocated to Islamabad, where I studied after 10th class, then I was living with my uncle, and I was a little free from them, a little far away from them. So then I left and I continued my English education. And finally, I left Pakistan. I went into self-exile in Afghanistan in past 10 years. Yes.
Yeah, I would like to comment a little bit on the situation of Pashtuns. Actually, we are
Yes.
considered second-class citizens.
Yes.
We don't have human rights in Pakistan, and I am personally a witness to it when you try to promote the rights of the people, especially women and children. Then the Pakistani military establishment tries its best to force you to stop it, and the cases are registered against you. The same cases with the PTM, you can see our human rights activists, most of them have from 40 to 50 FIRs registered against them just for their peaceful protest. They have not been involved in any terrorism. They have not broken anything, but FIRs have been registered against them. On the other hand, the terrorists, they roam around freely. They kill people with impunity, and not a single FIR is registered against them. Most of the journalists and human rights activists who have been killed by Pakistani military and these fanatics, even a single case has not been investigated, not to think about any punishment. So these things are done with impunity to radicalize the Pashtun society. Systematically, we have been, kept away from education. There is no industry in our areas, no jobs in our areas. So it's very easy to recruit Pashtuns as war gun fodder in different wars. Pakistan, because Pakistan is like a rentier state for different international powers. They rent the fanatics and terrorists to these powers in different countries to be used, like in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria, and in Lebanon, and even against Israel in Yemen. So Pakistan is serving them, and Pakistan point of view will be heard by the international community until or unless Pakistan is serving them well. There is no place in Pakistan for human rights activists. You would have heard of Tehreek-e-Labbaik recently, which were protesting against the French ambassador. They were fully supported by the Pakistani military establishment. And last time when they protested, they were even given money to return to their homes. No cases were registered against them. Even they killed and injured Pakistani police, but they are still roaming around, no cases against them, and they are being protected by the Pakistani military establishment. So now we will come to the origin, the Israeli origin of Pashtuns. So you all know about well that there are very prominent personalities who have researched on this topic, like Professor Navras Jat Afridi, who has worked really done a great job on this subject. Professor Shelva Well of Israel, and then Rabbi Harry Rosenberg, then Professor Mehnaz Afridi, and of course Lowell Joseph Gallen has also written a book to create an understanding between the Jews and the Muslim world. That's also been, actually he has edited the works of Asher Eder and Professor Palese of Italy, if I'm not pronouncing it wrong. So there has been a lot of research, historical and sociological plus anthropological work. Dots have been we have been trying to connect the dots, but it's still in the process. The things are not clear even now. But recently I read an article, even a research work by Professor Zaman Stanizai. I've sent it to Lowell Gallen to read it. Actually, the main purpose of his research was that the Pashtuns are not the lost tribes of Israel. He presented different points, and especially his main idea was that if we promote this idea of lost tribe of Israel, as there is great animosity towards Israel and the Jews in the international media, and even at the local level, anti-Semitism is really very high. So it will create problems for them and create, animosity towards Pashtuns because they will be considered a group from apart. So if you would like to comment, otherwise I'll read some of his, findings or research to you to discuss it further.
Well, I have no comments at the moment. I'd like to hear what you want to share. Perhaps Umar
Yeah,
or Les have some comments.
Okay, I'll read some of his, points so that you have an idea why he has written it. Actually, Professor Zaman Stanizai, is at the Department of Political Science, California State University, Dominguez Hills, Carson, California. In his abstract, Are the Pashtuns the Lost Tribe of Israel? He says that the recently resurfaced rumors propped up by certain Israeli circles that Pashtuns are the lost tribes of Israel has given academic circles a lingering pause. Its biblical claims are anecdotal, its historical documentation is inconsistent, its geographic claims are incoherent, and its linguistic assertions are implausible. More importantly, the claim doesn't stand a chance of DNA verification. Politically, the claim has hit a raw nerve in Afghanistan, where the legitimacy of Pashtun power as an ethnic majority is challenged, while in Pakistan, the distinct Pashtun cultural identity is threatened. Amidst this hyped ethno-linguistic strife that threatens regional stability, you read it, that threatens regional stability, the why now of the resurfaced controversy is as unnerving as the why then of its origins in the this is disconcerting. This article examines the claim from historical, cultural, linguistic, and genetic perspectives as it explores the root causes of how the rumors may have started in the first place and the reason for its persistence. The Mughals vilified their rival Pashtuns by popularizing the Pathan as a pejorative that lingered as disparaging cultural stereotypes. Even today, Indian mothers depict Pathans as monsters. When they put their children to bed, they scare them, telling them, if you don't sleep, the Pathan will come and get you. Derision and contempt heretofore reserved for Jews. Heretofore reserved for Jews. You can look at the resemblance they want to make between the Jews and the Pashtuns. If anything, this scorn and hatred may be the only common denominator between the Jews and the Pathans, Afghans in India, the two groups that resisted assimilation and were considered outsiders. There's no record of reference prior to this period that connects the Jews and the Pathans that had now become synonymous with Afghans. I'll give you, he has given a little bit history of that if it's not too long. The earliest of these stories in Khane Jahan, Lodi's Mahazane Afghani, compiled in the reign of Mughal Emperor Jahangir in the 16th century. Subsequently, Bakhtawar Khan describes the journeys of the Pashtuns from the Holy Land to Ghor, Ghazni, and Kabul in Miratul Alam, the mirror of the world, and the grapevine of Rehmat bin Shah Alam in Khulasat-e Ansab. Embellished variation of these stories get told and retold in Fariduddin Ahmad in Risalat-e Ansab al-Afghanistan, Nematullah al-Hawari in Tarikh Afghana, History of Afghans translated to Bernardon in 1829, the 1770 work of Muhammad Zadiq Tarikh Hafize Rahmatani. Sir Alexander Burns, the first British envoy to the port of Kabul in 1837, claims that when he questioned King Dost Muhammad Khan about the descent of Pashtuns from the Israelites, the king replied that his people had no doubt of that, though they repudiated the idea of being Jews. Burns writes about the Pashtuns, they say that Nebuchadnezzar, after the overthrow of Israel, transplanted them into the towns of Or near Bamiyan, and that they were called after their chief Afghan. They say that they lived as Israelites till Khalid summoned them in the 1st century of Muhammadans. Return Elphinstein, as quoted in Cairo, claims as regards the Ghor immigrants, it is known that tens of 12 tribes remained in the east after their brethren returned to Judea. And the supposition that the Afghans are their descendants explains easily and naturally both the disappearance of the one people and the origin of the other. Sir Olive Caro, the British Viceroy's Foreign Secretary, and his 60 years of acquaintance with the Pashtuns, in his famous work, The Pathans, points to several inconsistencies in these claims, some of which I have incorporated in the following. Claim of Pashtun Jewish ancestry: the sons of Afghana withdrew after the captivity, some to the mountains of Ghor in the center of what is now Afghanistan, and some to the neighborhood of Mecca in Arabia. Afghana, the grandson of King Saul, was the chief commander of the army in Solomon's reign. At the time of the Jewish captivity, Khalid bin Walid belonged to the tribe of descendants of Afghana who resided near Mecca. Khalid bin Walid sent a letter to his kinsmen of the Bani Israel settled in Ghor, inviting them to Islam. As a result, a number of representatives of Afghans of Ghor, led by one Qais, meet the Prophet at Medina. The Prophet remarks that Qais was a Hebrew name and gives Qais the name of Abdul Rashid and confers upon him the title of Pathan. Qais is said to be the descendant from Saul in the 37th generation. While the search for the lost tribes of Israel may be worthwhile endeavor for some zealots in Israel, the claim of Jewish descent from Pashtuns is a dangerous adventure, not just because the claim does not stand a chance of meeting the rigors of scientific inquiry supported by historical, anthropological, linguistic, political, and cultural analysis, but because raising this controversy issues in the times of current political turmoil, the ethno-linguistic sensitivities in Afghanistan and the political unrest in Pakistan only adds fuel to the fire of a deadly civil strife that has engulfed the two countries for decades, contributing to further political instability in the region. For this reason alone, the timing of this mere vicious venture of wishful thinking is reckless, foolhardy, and irresponsible. So this was, these were, I think, up to some extent, he confirmed the dissent, and just due to the fear of being, animosity in the region for the Pashtun people and to create further instability, he says that it's not a good idea to promote the idea of Pashtuns being Israelite origin. So your comments?
Yeah, that's amazing. Can I just ask, Fazal and Umar, could you just give us a few, if you know, any symbols or traditions that the Pashtun have that are similar to any Jewish traditions that they may have kept through the generations? Are there any similar customs or things that they that identify them that they've kept through the generations that have a similarity towards Judaism that you might know of?
Actually, I don't remember it now, but a person named Nadav Sufi was collecting these similarities, and he did a lot, and we helped him. Our team in Pakistan and Afghanistan, they helped him. It was in 2017. So I don't remember those things, but they were many similarities, cultural similarities.
Okay, and
well, I can add something to that. There's because I studied the theology a little bit. There's the Pashtun Wali, The Pathan law is very similar to Torah law. And if you'll ask Pathans, and we have two right here, given a choice between the Islamic law and the Pukhtunwali, which takes precedence, the Pukhtunwali. So that gets into, that's something we might want to ask Navras Afridi about, because he studied he has a Hindu mother and a Pashtun father, and he is the father of Jewish studies in India. This is sometimes this is actually true. That's his life's mission, to introduce Jewish studies to Indian universities where he teaches, and he can tell perhaps in a future session more about the theological elements and the great similarities between the Pashtun law and the Torah.
Yes, actually, it's true that Pashtuns have always kept the Pakhtunwali and their local traditions above the Islamic law. But it has recently been changed because even during my presence in Pakistan, we resolved our disputes through our jirga system, which was more important than Islamic, laws for resolving the issues. But after the arrival of these fanatics and Taliban, that was changed a little bit. But again, the Pashtuns are hankering for their old system. That is one thing, Pashtunwali. One thing is very important, that and especially in the tribal areas, and even in other areas also, if somebody killed someone in another area, so, and when he came to our tribe, so our tribe protected him. The tribe provided him, protection, food, and even house to protect him. So even if he has committed a crime, it's normal in our tribal areas. Second thing, the people say that Pashtuns, the Jews, they don't eat camel meat. Pashtuns also, because you would have seen that in the whole of Pakistan, the camel meat, camels are slaughtered during Eid al-Adha. But Pashtuns, they don't do it. They never done it, because normally they don't like to eat the meat of camel. The other thing that that is normal, I don't know, because I have been away for almost 15 to 20 years. When the wife of a brother, the brother dies, the wife of the brother is married by his brother. Keep in mind the Islamic traditions, it's very difficult, but Pashtun do it. The third thing, that when you talk to Pashtuns, they said that Pashtuns have another religion, the fifth religion, that refers to the Pakhtunwali. When it comes to Islam and something like that, they says that no, we have another religion, also the fifth religion. So there are so many things that the people say. And the most important thing is that whenever you talk to Pashtuns, they will say that we are Bani Israel. Most of the time, our elders used to say that we are Bani Israel, despite the fact that they nurture a kind of animosity against the Jews, but they say that we are of Israeli origin. So these are some similarities. There are more, but that I could, remember at the moment.
Fazal,
I should add a historical. I have to add a historical note here, because most people today in the world are ahistorical, don't know what happened this morning. In 1978, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. And for 10 years until 1988, the Soviets were resisted primarily by the Pashtunim, and who suffered over 1 million dead, millions injured by mines, many children, and millions of refugees. Yes, there was support from Charlie Wilson. There's a book in the movie Charlie's War, Congressman Charlie Wilson and one friend in the CIA, assuming that story is correct, did get them the weapons. They could shoot down the Hind helicopters, which were blowing away Pashtun villages. Having then defeated the Soviets. In fact, this was one of the major factors in the collapse of the Soviet Union on December 31st, 1991. The Soviet flag went down, the Russian flag went up. Is the largest land empire in human history, turned itself off legally without a fight, amazingly. And the Pashtunim were prepared to take unlimited casualties, which they did. The Pashtun revolution was then betrayed by the Saudi intelligence services and the CIA, and the Taliban were brought in, who follow a version of the Wahhabi religion known as Deobandism. And they were betrayed. And then came in the Taliban, who represent this terrible Wahhabi theology. So what you've been watching for 40 years is a Pashtun Israelite Holocaust. Now it says in the book of Zechariah that when it will be in the future that the fast days are turned into feast days, that the children of Judah and the children of Israel will mourn separately for their respective disasters. We will mourn the Holocaust and the Khmelnytsky massacres and the Crusades, and those of the lost tribes of Israel, wherever they are, will mourn their catastrophes and disasters. So up until 1948, Afghanistan was doing pretty good. Then began the destruction by the Soviet Empire, and then came the destruction by our CIA, the Saudi intelligence services, which then increased the heroin production to fund their black operations. And that has continued since 1990. Then in came America. Why? Not to stop the Taliban. For some reason, they were reducing the heroin production, and that's used to fund the black operations, MI6 and the CIA, which are in totally deep state. In came President Trump to put an end to it. He's still the president, as you'll see in a few months. Remember what I'm telling you here. The recounts of the votes are underway in Georgia, in Arizona, and they're not getting away with it. And watch, remember what I'm telling you now. It will seep into the corporate fascist media over the next few months because they can't avoid saying something about it. Now they're trying to say, oh, they're screaming about it, because they know what to do. So Donald Trump, when he comes back in the saddle openly, he never left it, he's just directing operations from Mar-a-Lago, will bring real peace he'll help bring between the various Pashtun tribes, and hopefully we can convert the Taliban back to Israelite faith. Incidentally, they're where we exist. And they say, oh yeah, we are Israelite, but we want to liberate Palestine from the Zionists. That will be dealt with pure spiritual power emanating from Jerusalem, which is happening right now. So it doesn't matter all the money of all the king's horse and all the king's men and the Saudi Arabia and the Kuwait and the Bedouin tribal crime family fiefdoms on the Gulf. Ultimately, as it says in the prophet Zechariah, in this week's prophetic reading of Bahalotecha, where Zechariah is shown the vision of the menorah, and he says to the angels, what does it mean? It says, the angel says, you don't know what it means? He says, no. The angel says, this is what it means, not by might, not by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord of hosts. Now, I don't ask anyone to take that on face value. You'll see it happen. Just like Mahatma Gandhi, he had no weapons. He wore a bedsheet. He was the most powerful man in India. A little old man could sit on the roof and say, I'm going to fast until the Hindus and Muslims stop fighting. This is before the internet. And they did. That's power. You can't buy it. Either you have it or you don't. So people don't realize that up until 1978, Afghanistan was doing pretty good. It's been destroyed. It has to be rebuilt in every way. And Pashtunistan has to be restored. And in my opinion, you can't say this, but I can, the Pakistani criminal regime has to be overthrown. Remember when Pakistan was established by the British, who liked to cause trouble when they left a place, ethnic conflicts and chaos. In 1948, 1949, as the Hindus went south, the Muslims went north, 1 million people were exterminated. That was just fine with the British imperialist empire. Said, well, we have to go. We're going to leave a mess behind for you, which they did. So again, I want to say we're looking at a 40-year Pashtun Israelite Holocaust. That's all I wanted to say about that.
Okay. Wow, Lowell, very interesting. Okay, can I just mention something to Umar and to Fazal, something that's really quite amazing for me. When I asked about the similarities or traditions or things that have in common with Judaism, so when you mentioned that the Pashtun, they don't eat camel meat, that is a very big deal, because in the Bible, it's very interesting. They speak about kosher foods, animals that you're allowed to eat. And then it brings in that there are 4 animals that don't fit into the category. And the Torah actually mentions these 4 animals that either have, what happens, that you can only eat food that have cloven hooves and chew the cud. But then the Torah says, well, what about an animal that has one of these, but not both of them? And it actually mentions the 4 animals. One is the pig, which has the cloven hooves but doesn't chew the cud. And then the 3 others is the camel, the hare, and the rock badger. And these foods are prohibited, they're forbidden. So hearing you say that Pashtuns don't eat the camel, that's a very big deal, because that's part of, it's actually one of the laws from the Torah, that you aren't supposed to eat from these 4 animals as well, and including in those animals is the camel. So I really want to thank you for, that's been very interesting for me to hear that. And it's very significant.
Yes, of course, there are so many similarities, but under this, Wahhabist propaganda and the imposition of Taliban on Pashtuns, that is changing. They are trying to destroy our old traditions, and as you have heard what I have been reading from Mr. Stanizai, Zaman Stanizai, there is a propaganda initiated by certain quarters, and even in Pakistani media these things are now discussed, and they are really apprehensive about it. And the Pakistani intelligence services are, trying to find from where this, the origin theory is coming from, and they are afraid of it. So there are so many other things, and as Daud Khattak said, that we have discussed it with the different people, especially Ruan Kosovar, my friend with whom I've been talking to. Unfortunately, recently I cannot connect to him, but hopefully he is hale and healthy. We discussed it more than 11 years ago. Even with Joseph, we have been discussing Lowell, we have been discussing these issues. There are links, but one thing I would like to discuss with Lowell, that this man Stanizai says that as Pashtuns, as the Jews, they have been very, very connected to their traditions and their language. Then okay, the traditions, he doesn't talk, because we have the traditions, we have maintained those traditions, but the language, how the language disappeared, or is there any connection between Pashto and the Hebrew? So what's your what do you say about it?
The person
Fazal,
I would, excuse me,
Fazal.
the person is, to talk about that would be Isaac Mosesson. So we'd have to, and he's the linguist who knows about those things, not me.
I will comment on it about the language. Hello.
Yeah.
About the Hebrew and Pashto, there is a very strong similarity. Me and Israr Karim Zay, there's a person, he is the leader of a young movement, the Wish Banano Horzang, Awakened Youth Movement. We are a group of people in Kabul and in Europe, in Pakistan, in India, Pashtuns mainly. We are working on the Latin script for Pashto. Before I suggested the Russian script because Pashto grammar is more similar with the Russian language in our sounds and alphabets. But the original script of Pashto is Kharoshti. When I was in India, I was in 2016, I was working with some software developers to develop the old Kharoshti script and develop the keyboard for it. We determined that the old Kharoshti script alphabet are very, very similar to the today's Hebrew alphabets and the old Hebrew alphabet. This was discussed with Nadav and he wrote it down. It is on the card. He has compiled a small booklet, the similarities, linguistic similarities, cultural similarities, and even ancestral debates, the lineage. The second very strong thing is, which is very appealing to me as apart from the Kharoshti script, is the names of our tribes, like Yusuf Zay, like Suleiman Khail, like many other tribes. The names are from Israel, like Yusuf Zay and like Suleiman Khail. There are many other tribes like this. From where these names came. And also, I was called by a former Afghan president, Hamid Karzai. He was told by someone that Daud and some other people are working with Jews and they are registering people and they are looking for funds from Israel to send the Pashtuns to Israel and settle them in Judea and Samaria. There is some plan like this, and the return of the lost tribes. And they asked me, President asked me that, what you're doing. I told them that it is a very early stage. We don't have resources. We have nothing. There are some young people in Israel. They are researching the similarities between Pashtuns and the Jews. And then based on that, they're presenting it to some donors in Israel. Under the return of the lost tribes process, they may, based on the budget, support some of the people, some of Pashtun youth, girls and boys, and may settle them in Judea and Samaria, as we were told. And he called on his cultural minister and chief of staff, Karim Khura. Me and Karzai were face to face, like in the room, we were alone. There was no third person because Karzai was telling his cultural advisor that it's a very sensitive issue and I should discuss it in private. And then after 30 minutes, his cultural minister and former chief of the staff of the president, Karzai, he came in and he asked me that who are the people who were working with those two young men from Israel. And of course, there was a very strong Mujahideen leader who was a former Islamist and who fought against the Soviet Union in Afghanistan and top CIA agent. He was former Islamist, but he suddenly changed, like he became secular. He just distanced from his past. And he was our friend. He was then killed by Taliban in a suicide attack. He was once saved by the Afghan intelligence, but when I was in jail, someone told me in jail that Barakzai has been killed by Taliban in a suicide attack. Then I told him that Barakzai from Uruzgan, he is supporting us. He had the financial resources, he had bulletproof vehicles, and he had contacts in the government. And he is supporting us. We will receive some guests from Israel via New Delhi, and then he will receive them. The Karzai, the former president, was very happy. He said that I also like this, but if this happens, he told me they don't tell the people outside. There's so much, religious. Karzai was also part of the Mujahideen, but he was not himself a Mujahideen. He was just working as a clerk, is a translator to one of the Mujahideen leader who became the president later, and then Karzai himself became the president. So even Karzai was supporting this plan, and he said one thing to me that the Jews are very wise. They are settling Pashtuns in areas where the Jewish population is, very low, and they are settling or beefing them up with Pashtuns, so that the Arab population or the Palestinians, the so-called Palestinians, are, their we can say density is lowered. He said this. He said that this is part of the plan of the Israeli defense and security, but he also appreciated this, and he said that it's very beneficial for Pashtuns. And then when I was with the ISI F8 in Islamabad guest house, I was visited by the ISI chief, Director General, Lieutenant General Naveed Mukhtar, and his chief of staff, some brigadier person, and then one colonel. There was a whole team. And then they asked me that what you were doing with the Israelis, because in my phone book, there were a lot of Israelis, about like 30 to 40 contacts from Israel, with the codes from Israel. And I met some groups and they were asking me that what you're doing with them. I told them that it's we're working on the lost tribes, and we are one of the lost tribes. And we also work on the return process, possibly in the future. Then they were telling me that, are you connected to Mossad and this and that? I told them that no, we are just some young people, and we're interested in this. But the ISI was not really concerned about this connection. They were concerned about the security related issues, and they were asking me that what Mossad is doing. I had no clue and no idea of Mossad and activities. They may be here or not, I don't know. I told them that I only know the raw people from India, and the NDS. Of course, I've been meeting them, the military generals, the raw officers in India. It's on the Indian media. It's public. The India's chief, of course, in Afghanistan. But I told them I've never met people from Mossad. We have received, some people from Israel who are US citizens as well, but they were not intelligence people. We were mainly working on the Pashtuns' Jewish origins, and we are looking for the similarities, resulting from the script, the language, the culture, the ancestry, even color, the genetics. Also, the Nawraz Jat Afridi, he was introduced to me by Richard Benkin and some other people in India who are Pashtuns, basically Pashtuns. I discussed these things with them as well. About the Pashtuns' current situation, if this is a different issue, but I want to mention it here. Karzai was interviewed by a German magazine. He was asked about America is fighting radicalism in Pashtunistan or Afghanistan. Karzai told them that when he was president in 2013, he went to USA and he met the former president Jimmy Carter and his security advisor, national security advisor, now deceased, Brzezinski. And he asked them that you were supporting the Islamic radicals in Pashtun land. This is true, and you were intentionally supporting them. And they told him that, because they says that they told him that they did support the Islamic radicals, and they brought the radical Islam in Pashtunistan and Afghanistan to create as many as crisis zones for the USSR. Then Karzai asked that it was not good. Like US is a democracy. United States of America is example for the world. It is the world, best civilization. They have values. They are moderate and secular. They told Karzai that we have defeated communism. That was more dangerous. Few Islamists, it is not a big deal. It means that Pashtuns have paid a very heavy price for the world civilization, for the protection of the US against communism. At a very heavy price, because today we are under our throats are under the, we can say the swords of these Islamists, which were once glorified as the equivalent to the America's founding fathers. According to Ronald Reagan, he said that the Afghan Mujahideens are equivalent to the America's founding fathers, and he was true. Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah, it is really, I would like to add one thing, that Pashtuns have fought a war against the USSR for the United States. But if that could have been done under the flag of nationalism rather than Talibanism or Mujahidism, that would have been, a different situation now.
Okay, I have to add something here. There are many Americas, many Englands, many Israels, many everywhere. Professor Bernard Lewis, who died a few years ago, was considered a great scholar of Islam. And he was. He's also a British intelligence officer in World War II. And after World War II, he was the one, look it up. You see, with the internet these days, it's very easy to research things. There's a lot of disinformation out there, but one, after a while, gets to learn how to distinguish between from 0 to 100, what's real and not. The doctrine of setting up fires around the Soviet Union. And how do you do that? Who are the stormtroopers for that? The Wahhabis, the Wahhabi movement, which has been developed since 1750, when it became the tribal religion of the Al Saud tribe in Najd. And Muhammad, in one of the hadiths, says, Shaitanim, Satans will come out of Najd. They know that, and they don't want you to know that. They're very scared. No, that doesn't mean us. It's somebody else. But of course, it was them. And the idea was to set the Soviet Union on fire by developing Wahhabi movements in the Islamic republics of the old Soviet Union, the Uzbek, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan. It didn't work for a very simple reason. The Soviets just killed them. They weren't allowed to come in, and they tried to come in. They didn't last very long. The Soviets just kept stomping on them and wiping the Wahhabis out whenever they crossed the borders. So it didn't work, but that was the policy. So you had this network that was set up from 1945 till the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. What do you do with a network of mass murderers? Don't use the term terrorists, they're murderers. And they exist. Like in The Lord of the Rings, King Theoden asks Aragorn at Helm's Deep, what are the Uruk-hai that were bred by Saruman? He said it's an army bred solely for the purpose of destroying the world of men. That's what the Wahhabis are. They have many names, Boko Haram and from Nigeria and Indonesia, but they all roads lead back to Riyadh. Supposedly there's been a change. I don't believe a word of it, but it's possible. So you have this army that's set up. What do you use it then for? Well, if you're the Anglo-American oil and banking establishment, you use it to cause chaos wherever you want. And a big uproar was caused a few years ago when the German defense minister Steinmeier, I think it was, actually spoke the truth. And he said to Saudi Arabia, this was before Donald Trump's supposed reformation there, we're getting tired of your people blowing up our cities. You got to stop that. We're not going to turn a blind eye to Wahhabi mass murder in Europe because we do business with you. That actually was the truth. This caused an uproar because you're not supposed to say the truth because money talks and business is business. Another point in that regard is most public faces of Islam in Europe, the community centers, mosques, are controlled by and financed by the Wahhabis. They don't represent the Muslims of Europe. Most of the Turks in Germany are not Wahhabis, but they're the ones who have the money, and they're the ones with whom the European governments did and still do business. And if the price of business is you blow up a few train stations, well, what's a few hundred of our citizens between friends? Money is money. Okay. So the Taliban, incidentally, did not defeat the Soviet Union. After the legitimate Pashtun resistance movements had done that, in their innocence and naivete, they were betrayed by the CIA, who then installed the Taliban and said, well, they didn't do anything. The Arab Wahhabi Salafi, that's another point. Wahhabis, as they are called by Sunnis and Shiites, call themselves Salafis. Okay, so they didn't defeat the Soviet Union. They came in after the Pashtunin defeated them and said, okay, we'll be brought in as the CIA, Saudi intelligence services, occupation government, and then the Pashtunin suffered under them. How do you change that? Since the Pashtun society has been destroyed so much for 40 years, you'd have to bring in, I don't know, the 40,000 Russian Spetsnaz and American Green Berets working with legitimate Pashtun partisan force and simply wipe them out. Either you can convert, sometimes they do, that's the power of ideas. They don't convert, wipe them out, especially all the Arab Wahhabi leaders. Masoud Faravar wrote an article about this that was published by the Wall Street Journal in 2000. That's how I found out about him. He wrote a book about his life. He also left Afghanistan. And in it, he says that there were the Arabs, there was a meeting in Afghanistan, and the Pashtun fighters were saying, we don't like those Arabs over there, we want to kill them. And the Arab Wahhabis, who are basically cowards, got scared. And he was talking about how they aren't us. He told me afterwards he was threatened for publishing that article which told the truth. Well, all sorts of truths are coming out now, whether people like it or not, because in the end, the truth always does come out sooner or later. Now, I want to tell you, gentlemen, that we're very fortunate to have joining our discussion Professor Asher Matathias, who is in Long Island, a professor of political studies, I think, and born in 1943 in a cave in Nazi-occupied Greece and saved by the grace of a German officer who thought he was a wonderful baby and said, that looks like my little son in Hamburg, and they left his mother alone in the cave. And he knows what persecution and suffering is, both what the Greeks went through under the Turks and during World War II, and also for Jews in Greece. And I know he has many questions and comments of his own. We're coming almost to the end of our time. I'd like to give the floor to him.
I'm sorry about the confusion in the time allotment, and I'm happy that you persisted in notifying me in time to hear a portion of this fascinating lecture. My observation, of course, you did not pursue the Bernard Lewis connection. He wrote a famous book about the war, the crisis, and the clash of civilizations, and it was bound to happen in the 20th century, and it continues in the 21st century. We have now societies that have been bred for the longest period of time in the darkest of dark ages in the West. We went through the Reformation and the nationalism and Renaissance. These societies in Pakistan, in Afghanistan particularly, are still mired and have to come to grips with loosening up their patriarchies to permit, for example, a simple thing like women's education, loosening corruption, the the commitment to tribal warfare, to things like saving face. Saving face, by the way, is not something that is uniquely to those societies. In Greece, there are still areas in Crete and in Thrace, in the northern part of Greece, where the fact that you have looked at my daughter the wrong way may bring retribution, may bring honor killings, and that goes on. I'm fascinated. I don't know whether you know more about Dr. Abdullah, who has been portrayed in the West as a harbinger of progress. But that's one man, and the last Jew in Afghanistan left. So I wonder, as I often said, societies that do not have Jews and other progressive people will suffer and do suffer, just as the exchange of populations in 1947 on August 15. It's a celebration for the independence of Pakistan and India, but actually it's a dark period because Nehru begged the Pakistani leader to stay together, to become one nation, a great nation, a multi-racial, multinational nation. And of course, Jinnah did not wish to do that. He wanted his Pakistan. Well, in Pakistan, we discovered that the greatest poets, the greatest literary figures are also rapidly anti-Semitic. We have to stop that. And I wonder, where we're headed after more than 3,000 American lives, blood, and treasure, trillions of dollars spent in Afghanistan. Wouldn't it be a nice gesture if Afghanistan were to recognize Israel, for example? And I'm not only talking about Afghanistan, Iraq. We have spent billions in Iraq. Iraq still is very much anti-Israel, anti-Semitic. All of these countries that have posited their existence on the irrational hatred of Jews. Jews have been demonized. They cannot. It's not for the Jew. They think of Jewish power. What's his name? The foreign minister of Pakistan was interviewed on American television, and he said, "You Americans are in the throes of Jewish power, of Jews who control the media." And the reporter, the hostess said, "That is an anti-Semitic statement, but it's the truth," he maintained. The truth.
Actually, they said deep pockets. They said Jews with deep pockets control the media.
Yes. I mean, I was astounded. I was listening to this and I said, my God, if the elites of these societies maintain these backwards, these primitive views, what hope is there for regular people, the populations, to come out of the darkness? I really feel for Afghani women and girls as the Taliban inching towards retaking the majority of government. And America, of course, will be there symbolically. And I hope it continues to give economic aid. But what do you see down the road, the next decade, are we going to regress or are we going to progress? I find it, I'm not able to sleep well knowing that the answer is still very much in doubt, that we are going to be living in a peaceful decade in the 2020s. What do you think?
Well,
I'm raising more questions than
wait,
offering answers.
Umar, Fazal, if do you have any, in terms of what, Asher, in terms of the issue of money, there's a simple way to deal with that is you follow the money, and things are true or they're not true. And most of the media, what I call it corporate fascist media, is controlled by 6 corporations. And there you want to look at who the stockholders are, and things are true or they're not true. The Sulzberger family, which founded the New York Times, were Jews. They may not have been very good Jews, and now they're bailed out by Carlos Slim, who the billionaire in Mexico who finances the paper, and he's not Jewish. Catherine Graham, who inherited the paper from her husband, was Jewish. What is his name? The trouble is, Jews in any host society, we rise to the top or the bottom everywhere because we're so turbocharged genetically and ethnically. And we do go into positions of parent power. You had that in Weimar Germany, most of the major papers were owned by Jews. But the real power, which is land and resources, were not controlled by Jews. The Jews were in positions of apparent power, and they could then be removed by the very Junkers and industrialists in Germany who were very happy to have the wrath of the people directed at the Jews. This is intentional, the same way that the Poles put Jews in charge of their estates in the Ukraine. So when the Ukrainians got mad and revolted under Khmelnytsky, they could say, look what the Jews are doing to us. So again, you deal with apparent power versus real power. So you can't just say to people the Jews control Hollywood. Well, the fact is that all the studios founded in Hollywood were founded by Jews in the 1920s and 30s. That's the reality. What the reality is today, who owns them, again, you want to look at the stockholders. That was what I did at Reuters. I was in the corporate reporting unit. You follow the money. Where does the money go? The aid that went to Afghanistan and Iraq, most of those are money laundering operations where very little of the money gets to the local people. It goes into the pockets of the thieves, murderers, and rapists in the host countries, and a certain amount is recycled back to Europe and the United States to those who authorize the aid projects. How do you do that? You send it not to them, you send it to their family members, you send it to them their foundations, and then they get book deals. Oh yeah, we'll publish a book. You get $100 million. That's called a bribe. Or you have a speaking engagement on Wall Street, fine, for 20 minutes, we'll give you $5 million. That's called a bribe. That's not a speaking fee. Those are not royalties. There are all sorts of ways of that's why you have Trump. I know we have disagreements about Trump. Where do you think the money that goes to Hamas and the Philistine chaos goes? Part of it goes to their leaders. Very little goes to the people. And the rest is recycled back to the European and American politicians who authorized it. Of course, not directly into their bank accounts. This is how the real world works. So when you say money is poured into Afghanistan and poured into Iraq, that's how you launder it back to yourself. And you need perpetual chaos too, so you can launder more of it. But let me refer this, since we have Umar, Daud, Khattak in Pakistan, and Fazal or Rehman Afridi, who is one of the leaders of the Pashtun expatriate community in all of Europe. Talk to them. You don't want to talk to me, an old Jew in Jerusalem. Talk to them.
I would like to just add a few words that up till now, the Americans and the West, they have invested in wars. They have invested in radicalization. They have invested in Talibanization. Now that has to be changed radically. Now they need to invest in education. They need to invest in infrastructure, in industries, creating jobs for the people there so that they are not easily, used in the wars in different parts of the world. So I think that has to be changed. Instead of investing in wars, need to be invested in development, and especially in the development of Pashtuns people. And for that, I think there is a responsibility of our brothers, as Joseph saved our brothers Judea and Benjamin. And now the Joseph need you. You have to help us first, get yourself stronger, and then the Pashtun people. I think it's now time that the money should be invested. Your influence should be used for the development of the Pashtun people. If they are developed, I think they will change also.
I will also add a few comments here. Is for my experience, the United States of America is now turning from the Islamist towards the nationalist, the secular class of people among the Pashtuns in Pakistan and Afghanistan. I think it is very hard for them to switch between the two. When the USSR was defeated, after that, it was very hard for the US to immediately switch the relation from Mujahideen and Taliban to the secular class of Pashtuns, the nationalist class, basically. But over 20 years now, I can see that there is a shift in the US policy, and they will be shifting the, the money, basically the money, because money is the main thing, and their relationship, their political and diplomatic support, and their state support, even military support from Mujahideen, because Mujahideen are almost all died. Only there is one Sayaf and Gulbuddin Hekmatyar. 2 or 3 are remaining. 2 or 3 Mujahideen leaders are remaining. The rest have died. And they are going to die very soon because they are over 70, over 80. And also the Taliban, the US will deal with the Taliban, and the US hopefully will change them, because US can change. We know the US can change them because they changed the Mujahideen as well. The Mujahideen had once long beards, and when they came to government, and they had beard shaved, and they had neckties and pant shirts. So Taliban can be changed also. But the US is now investing. They're planning to invest on the young secular Pashtuns. But we have to respond to this, because we have to fetch this opportunity, as I discussed with Fazal Rehman Afridi 1 month ago. We have to fetch this opportunity, and fetching this opportunity, we need the support of our friends like you, friends who are in the US, who are non-Pashtuns, who are Americans, who are Jewish Americans, and who have contacts with the US Department of State, especially because they are mostly giving funds in education, in community awareness, and state building in these in Afghanistan and Pakistan both. I discussed this with Fazal Rahman Afridi. So we should we should consolidate these efforts and should coordinate. I will also write about this, how we can help each other, and how we can come with few NGOs who are supported by our friends, and run by our friends here in Pashtunistan, Afghanistan, and supported by our friends abroad, who have a relationship with the US Congress, the US State Department, and different US organizations, government organizations.
Okay, Umar, can I ask you a question? And I think our listeners would be intrigued to find out, if you can. It might be a bit too personal, but when you were in the madrasas, you were actually studying, and you were going to become a mullah, and possibly even a fanatic mullah, and you learned the Quran by heart, and you could recite in the holy month of Ramadan. So what actually spurred you on to change your direction? If it's too personal, you don't have to answer, but I think anybody who's watching this would be intrigued to, there you were in the madrasas and you were studying and learning, and I mean, you knew the Quran off by heart. So why would you change your direction? What spurred you on, or what was the impetus?
Because of the suppression by my Islamist parents. They were suppressing my desires. I was very keen, and I was very, interested in learning English. I bought a grammar book, English grammar book, with my own money. I was keeping pigeons, and I used to sell the birds, and then I used to get some the English magazines, English newspapers, English learners grammar. I used to study these books when I was in class 6th. My father used to come and throw them out, and used to tell me that you are very interested in the Jewish books and Western books and English books. You're not interested in Islam. And even I was going to madrasa, I was memorizing Quran by heart. I was praying 5 times. I was a very good Muslim. I used to wear cape, the white one, and also the dress. But still, he was not satisfied. He told me that I should not have any interest in learning English. I should just do metric. I should pass the 10th class because it is necessary for getting a job here. Like we can go to army, or we can go to some police department, or soldier's job. That is necessary for that. But apart from this, you should not study English. He was suppressing me, and he was also, forcing me to study long hours. Even it was not needed. I was doing very well at madrasa. Even my madrasa teachers were very happy with my performance. But still, he used to force me to recite and study Quran for long hours, and always, suppressing my desires, my personal life, desires and objectives that I had right from the beginning. So this happened to turn me against Islam, against the Islamism in Pashtun society, against Mujahideen. And then I researched when I got internet in 2008. I got a laptop for the first time, and then I made a Facebook account. And at that time, there was Arcut. Before the Facebook, we used to do Arcut. And then I had some friends, and then I searched on the internet about the Pashtuns misery and how we became fanatics, how we became Islamists from a very secular community and society back then in the time of Zahir Shah 1960, and then during the communist rule in Afghanistan. How we turned to be Mujahideen and Taliban, and it was all because of the US Sunni Islam policy, as a weapon to use against certain. So this way I became socialist and communist because I was hating America. I used to like the USSR, then gone, very much because they were supporting the secular, the communists of Afghanistan who brought revolution. They were mostly nationalist. And then I turned out to be a nationalist finally, because communism and socialism also didn't appeal me. So finally, I became a Pashtun nationalist with moderate values. I also went to India, and I saw, I met the Hindu leaders, the Hindu religious figures there. They were telling me that Pashtuns were first Hindus, and they were also, they're also doing, these similarities research between the culture and ancestor, lineage, these things they're doing as well. But theirs are basically like, this whole area was Hindu and Buddhist before. Some culture remains are there of the Hindus in Pashtun society as well. It's because of the King Kanishk and King Chandragupta Maurya when they were ruling this area. And also Pashtuns Pashtuns were divided between Buddhists and Hindus, Zoroastrians, and Jewish. We may not be, all of the Pashtun tribes may not be Jewish. Some of the tribes like Yusuf Zay, Suleiman Khail, and Ishaq Zay, this is what I think. Some of the Pashtun tribes can be Jewish, and the others can be Zoroastrian, Buddhist, even Hindus as well. But I forgot something. Okay, I forgot something. This is the end.
Thank you. No, I really
It-
appreciate it. Thank you.
It's amazing that a society voluntarily, and lest we be holier than thou, it was in America, we were very, very late in coming to the game until 1920 to give women the right to vote, and even today, of every dollar that a man earns, a woman earns 80%. So I often wonder what possesses, except of course, deep misogyny, that what possesses a society to voluntarily cut off 50% of its native talent to suppress women. Do you see that the progress, the little progress that Afghanistan made towards wider education for women, just as you, as a man, had difficulty? Can you imagine? Do you have any siblings who are girls who are now women who had difficulty being educated in anything except to how to become the wife, the second, third, or fourth wife of some Afghani?
The girl situations are really, they are even worse. There are a lot of girls
They're
even
worse than what it be, I say.
yes, they're even worse.
It's worse than
Because-
what we. Yeah.
I said-
Yes, of course, the girl situation is really worst, in a state like Pakistan, which was stable during the Afghan war. About 4,000 schools in the last 20 years have been destroyed by these fanatics, bombed by these fanatics, the
Yes.
Taliban. And personally, my children could not go to schools because every day when they left for the school, there were rumors that they will be abducted by Taliban or there will be a bomb in the school. So
Right.
they could not go to the school. So it's natural. Even they put, poison into the tanks or where they used to drink water. They sprinkle, acid on their faces
Oh,
while going to school. So it's really, difficult for the girls. Recently, there have been some changes in Afghanistan. Some women have been promoted to some important posts, but there is a need of a lot of work to be done, both in Afghanistan and Pakistan, where Pashtun lives.
thank you. Thank you. Just to compare, in Greece, having to be born a girl, a female, is a calamity. People begin, the family cries, not from unhappiness, not from happiness. We came to America, and our children, my wife and I, when we married, and we had 3 children, all 3 of them are daughters, who gave us 7 grandchildren. But the point is that every time my wife gave birth, it was a joyous occasion, that it was a healthy girl, but it was a girl. But that was okay. So I thank God personally that I left Greece to come and live in America so that I can become more accepting of women and girls, because again, the prejudice is very deep and continues to be in Greece, although again, slowly and over decades, less so, but it's still there. People cry from because they would have to eventually take care of their dowry. You know, dowry is not now officially is frowned upon and is not accepted by law, and yet traditions are very difficult to overcome. So the fear that a family will become impoverished by having to undergird the marriage of their daughter brings frustration and unhappiness. I wonder again, I'm sure it's something like this in Afghanistan or in Pakistan for that matter.
Of course, that's the case. The Pashtuns also, they don't like child's girls, you know, and even if they are educated, you know, they remain at their home. They do not do anything, you know, they are not left for jobs to work outside their homes. So there are certain traditions,
Yes,
you know, which need to be changed. And the situation is really just as Daud Khattak has said, that it's worst for the women.
thank you.
Thank you. I think it's almost 2:30,
Yes.
2 hours and 30.
Oh, it's over.
Unless it's about time to conclude the program until our next
Wow.
meeting.
Well, okay.
Thank
On
you very
behalf
much.
of the root and branch, we want to thank you, Fazal and Umar and Prof. Asher for.
Where did our guests broadcast from? Afghanistan and Pakistan?
Fazal, where are you at the moment?
I'm in France.
In
Paris.
France.
Oh.
Prof. Fazal's actually in France at the moment, but and Umar, you're in Pakistan.
Yes,
Oh.
I'm in
Pakistan. Which city? Kashmir?
Khattak.
Karen.
Umar, I have to ask you, I think, and Fazal, a very important question before we end. Are you passionate cricket supporters?
I was even a player, but not now.
And
Yes.
Umar, do you like cricket?
I was playing cricket when I was small, but not now.
But do you support? Are you a fanatic supporter?
No, I'm not a fanatic supporter. I support sports in general, but not a fanatic supporter of cricket is Pashtun or.
Okay, so I
Not
can
cricket
just
for quite a long
tell
time.
you
No
before we
cricket.
end a very nice. When I was in South Africa in 2010 at a stamp exhibition, the Pakistani and the Indian commissioners didn't speak to each other,
Is
and
that right?
yeah, and I brought them together. And we started speaking, I started saying, guys, you both love cricket. You're passionate about cricket, and they both did. So I said, there's Tendulkar, who's like one of the world's best, and there's Imran Khan, who's also one of the world's best. And then they started speaking to each other about, the cricket, and you know, and then they became friends. So cricket sport can actually unite. So, you know, even people that, there's a lot of potential for that we can unite, and we've got so many things in common with each other. And I think what your talk has been so incredibly positive, and whoever watches this talk are going to be so inspired from both of you. You really are tremendous heroes and spokesmen for the Pashtuni people, and you just deserve to have your own independence, to have respect, and to be able to live freely as proud Pashtuni. You have such a tremendous history behind you, and I think we should all do everything in our power to help you to gain independence, to gain respect, and to live your lives freely. So I personally, and I think all of us, are extremely grateful for giving us your valuable time this evening. It's been phenomenal, your presentation, both of you, and we are so grateful to you.
Thank
thank
you
you
very
very,
much
very
for
much.
your kind comments. Actually, as Umar also discussed, that we are a little bit careful. There is, a very strong anti-Semitism and anti-Israeli, problem in Pashtun society. For the moment, we want to concentrate on the Western world, and especially our Jewish brothers, to inform them about the Pashtun people. And later, with the passage of time, we will concentrate on the Pashtun people, so that create awareness about their origin, create awareness about education, and especially girls' education. So later, I think things will change. Good times are coming, and hopefully
Amen.
we will
Amen.
cooperate with
Um,
each other.
Les, by the way, the greatest rapprochement in the 30s was made between Joe Louis and Max Schmeling of Germany on the rink, on the boxing ring. They fought each other. They each won a match, and then they became the best of friends until Joe Louis died. And Max died in 2010 at the age of 95. Can you imagine? So there is hope in sports, bringing bridging
Asha,
people.
and I'll just mention to Fazal and Umar and Asha, and Lal knows this as well, the Israeli national soccer team, a third of the
Yes.
team, at least a third, maybe even more, comprised of Israeli Arab. And the
Yes.
captain of Hapoel Tel Aviv was Wali Badir, who's one of the greats in Israeli soccer, who is respected and admired by by everyone. So there is tremendous
There's
potential
hope.
for
There's-
coexistence and hope, and so there's a bright future ahead.
Besides, we are Jewish. We have to be optimistic. We believe in
Absolutely.
miracles.
We can believe in miracles, I think Batsman said, but you have to work very hard to make them happen.
Yes. Thank you very much,
Thank
gentlemen.
you. Thank you very much. And Lowell,
Be
thank
well.
you for organizing this event.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Time. Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
Umar. Thank you, Glassman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lord.